Hi, I'm Jerry Brainum, and today's question is a common question that I've seen on so many online forums and websites. Seems to be a lot of interest in this particular question, and hopefully I'll answer it for you now. And that question is this: do you lose muscle when you get off steroids? It's a common observation. You could see it in videos, and if you attend bodybuilding contests, many of the elite bodybuilding champions, a lot of times when they stop competing, they look like they've lost about 15 pounds. Their muscles are all atrophied, and they basically return to their normal genetic dimensions, let's say. This isn't to be confused with off-season, still competing bodybuilders who very often kind of like try and gain extra size. They don't have to worry about definition and that type of thing. So they eat a lot more and they tend to get a little on the heavy side. Obviously that doesn't involve muscle loss. If anything, it involves muscle gain. I'm talking about the extreme, let's say, loss of muscle that seems to appear in bodybuilders that either get off steroids or stop competing and get off steroids or drugs, that type of thing. So let's answer the question directly. Do getting off steroids cause a loss of muscle size? The answer is yes and no. And I don't mean to seem ambiguous here. Let me explain what I mean. In a previous video, I discussed a concept called muscle memory. Without getting into detail, it involves the retention of myonuclei, which are muscle nucleus cells that don't disappear when you stop training, but instead remain intact in the muscle. So if you lay off for an extended time, you might lose muscle size, but once you begin training again, you'll find that you quickly regain that muscle size in as little as a month or so because of those retained myonuclei. But now you say, what does this have to do with steroids? Okay, you don't have to be an exercise scientist to realize that steroids tend to produce larger muscles. And one of the things they do is they do many things, but one of the things they do in producing extremely large muscles is to promote additional myonuclei the same way. In other words, the effect is additive to that of training alone. In other words, just training alone and damaging a muscle is going to lead to increased myonuclei. But when you take steroids, you actually compound the situation where you get even more myonuclei. And the number of myonuclei in relation to each muscle fiber, it's called a muscle domain, has a direct relationship to how big that muscle fiber can get. And this explains why guys who take steroids have much bigger muscles. Okay, so now what happened? What does this have to do with not getting? Well, let's say you get off steroids, right? All those extra myonuclei that you've developed as a result of your working out and you're using the steroids does not disappear when you get off steroids. Again, it stays in the muscle. So let's say that you're an athlete, right? You're training for the Olympics. As I'm speaking, the Olympics in Rio are going on, so it makes sense. But anyway, let's say you're training for the Olympics and you've been taking steroids during your off season, and you get off the steroids, to pass the drug or doping tests. Okay, you go through the Olympics. You're considerably smaller. Let's say you're a field athlete, which are pretty, bigger than the track athletes. They lift heavy weights and so on and so forth. You compete in the Olympics, you win a medal, you don't win a medal, or whatever. But you are smaller because you've gotten off the steroids. Now, when you go back, let's say you decide to take a layoff after the Olympics. You don't want to train for 6 months because you've trained so hard for those Olympics. You just don't want to train. You want to lay off. So now you don't train, you eat normally, but you're not taking any steroids, no drugs. 6 months later, you decide, hey, I got to get back in training. You get back on the, you start to train again. But again, you decide to hold off on the steroids. What's going to happen is, as soon as you begin training, now this is with no steroids, your muscles are going to, I'd say within about 4 to 6 weeks, will be nearly as big as they were when you were on the steroids. Again, why? Because those additional myonuclei, which you develop through the current combination of exercise and steroid use, remain in your muscles. So when you start working out, you send a signal to the dormant myonuclei, hey, bud, wake up. We need you to start working again. They start working again. The protein synthesis increases in muscle. It's assuming you get enough protein in your diet, and your muscles start to get big almost as big as if you were on the steroids. Of course, when you take the steroids, again, it's another additive effect. You'll get even bigger. But here's a key point. There's a controversy in sports because they actually want to ban some athletes for life who found to be positive for steroids because the people who take the steroids, the athletes, it's now considered an unfair advantage because those extra myonuclei that they've developed from using the steroids stay with them for, again, who knows, 15, 20 years? And these critics claim that's an unfair advantage because having that extra myonuclei is going to promote extra muscle even if they're not on steroids. So, that's a controversy. So, a sidebar to this question is, what about, again, what's another reason why bodybuilders get smaller when they get off steroids? I'd say the main reasons from my personal observation are, first of all, they don't train as hard. A lot of them don't train at all. And as I said before, when you don't train, if you're not applying a stimulus to your muscles, they are going to shrink no matter who you are. I don't care what your genetics are. I don't care how genetically advantaged you are. If you don't apply a stimulus to your muscles, they will shrink. So one reason is they're not training hard. They're not training intensely. A lot of them don't eat as much. They lower their protein intake. And as a consequence, they lose weight. And to the naked eye, it appears that they've lost muscle. But you have to understand, when you take steroids, there's a certain amount of water retention in the muscle. A muscle is 72% water. When you get off the steroids, you lose a lot of extra water. So the combination of natural muscle atrophy to a certain extent, along with the water loss, makes it look like they lost a lot of muscle. Now, is this an inevitable consequence? It is not. Here's the thing. If you get off steroids, but you continue to train as hard as you were, in other words, you train as intensely as you did when you were on the steroids, and you continue to eat a good amount of food, the loss of muscle when you get off steroids will be minimized. Now, I got to point out, this rarely happens. Very few bodybuilders who take steroids continue to train as hard because steroids do a lot of things like increase muscle recovery. They have mental effects that tend to cause you to train harder. Without that added stimulus, it's a little bit difficult to train the same way off steroids as you were on steroids. So the thing is that, it takes a lot of mental power, is what I'm trying to say, to use that same level of intensity of training, that same level of nutrition. If you did, the loss of muscle when you get off steroids would be minimized. I'm not going to say you're not going to lose anything. You will lose a little bit of weight. You might even lose a little bit of muscle because of what they call a rebound cortisol effect. When you're on steroids, the steroids block the activity of cortisol, which is a major catabolic hormone that promotes muscle protein breakdown. When you get off the steroids, there's a temporary rebound cortisol flood, which tends to cause a little bit of muscle atrophy. So a little bit of muscle loss when you get off steroids is inevitable. What I'm saying here is the notion that you will lose all your muscles, which is what they often say online, is complete nonsense, and that is avoidable. So if you want further information on this type of data, also on nutrition, exercise science, anti-aging, fat loss research, hormonal therapy, all at a cost of 33 cents a day, 40 to 50 pages a month, no ads, no bullshit, pure fact, written in simple English, no heavy technical terms. You don't need a science degree. So apply today to my Applied Metabolics newsletter. All your questions will be answered. Trust me. Take care.
Steve is not around. I'm like, yo, I didn't put it away, bro.
It's not coming with us?
He comes down and yells at me.
Why don't you put away your fucking wins?
Rubber plates, the whole thing, push it to the corner. Fucked up. Sometimes we have slobs in the gym. Usually they get 1 warning, 2 warnings, and 3 warnings, and they're out.